Good morning. I'm Lisa Burby. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Huntington. We are here today for a virtual service, and it's really good to be together. We are streaming live from multiple locations, so please be patient with any technical mishaps you might see or hear. We're using Zoom format so we can all see each other. We'd like to extend a special welcome today to visitors who may be joining our virtual service for the first time, and any newcomers who are returning. And if you're new to our congregation and want to speak with someone to learn more about us, please contact our office administrator, Lauren Knoll, at office@uufh.org. And if you have a pastoral matter, you can contact our minister, Reverend Jude Geiger, at minister@uufh.org. I'll be putting that information in the chat in a little while. And know that whoever you are, whomever you love, and wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. I do have a few announcements to start us off this morning. There's going to be a newcomers orientation today at 1 p.m. Newcomers are able to meet our minister, Reverend Jude Geiger, to talk about and learn more about Unitarian Universalism. If you haven't already received your invitation, I'll be posting the link for it in today's chat as well. So look for that in a little bit. Next Sunday, on March 14th at 11:30 a.m., Reverend Jude will start a Zoom book discussion on an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States for Young People, Revisioning History for Young People by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And that information is also in our weekly flash, and it will be on our website, so you can look there. And also, the UFH Auction Gala 2021 is virtual and online for the first time. All silent bidding will be online starting April 18th to April 24th. And then on the 24th of April, we'll have a virtual Zoom gala at 7:30 for fun, entertainment, and live oral bidding for some very special items. You can check out and bid on the many items available at your leisure during the pre-gala week. For more information, look in the flash each week, and there's also a button on the homepage of the UFH website. You can click on that and it will take you to all the information you need to know. And apparently you can start donating your items this week, so don't delay. Also, mark your calendars for March 20th at 4 p.m. for the ordination of Greta Joseidol. She was our fellowship's former intern and sabbatical preacher, and this will be a Zoom event, and the details are already in the flash and on Facebook. And one last announcement, a special reminder to RE families and teachers that the religious education time will be starting at 11:30 to allow for an easier transition from the service to RE classes for our families. I invite you to settle into your bodies, quiet your minds as we breathe deeply together and settle into our time of worship. Please join me in saying our mission statement. In religious community, we nurture our individual spirits through caring for one another and helping to heal the world. Please join me now in singing our affirmation, Common Ground.
Good morning, everyone. Our chalice lighting words are from the Reverend Elizabeth Strong. Reverently, we offer this symbol of our hope and high intent. Reverently, we bequeath the flame to you. This is the light that is lit for everyone who comes into the world. Bear this light to others one by one. Let the flame go from life to life till all is lit with its warmth. Tell that the light means wisdom. Tell that the light means kindness. Tell that the light means understanding. Tell that the light means tolerance. Tell that the light means sacrifice. Tell that the light is a vision of a fairer world. Tell that this is the light that is lit for everyone who comes into the world. Our story this morning is a familiar one to many of us. A woman in a village was surprised to find a fairly well-dressed stranger at her door, asking for something to eat. "I'm sorry," she said, "I have nothing in the house right now." "Not to worry," said the amiable stranger. "I have a soup stone in this satchel of mine. If you let me put it in a pot of boiling water, I'll make the most delicious soup in the world. A very large pot, please." The woman was curious. She put the pot on the fire and whispered the secret of the soup stone to a neighbor. By the time the water began to boil, all the neighbors had gathered to see the stranger and their soup stone. The stranger dropped the stone into the water and then tasted a teaspoonful with relish and exclaimed, "Ah, delicious. All it needs is some potatoes." "Well, I have potatoes in my kitchen," shouted one man. In a few minutes, he was back with a large quantity of sliced potatoes, which were thrown into the pot. Then the stranger tasted the brew again. "Excellent," they said, but added wistfully, "If only we had some meat, this would become a tasty stew." Another person rushed home to bring some meat, which the stranger accepted graciously and flung it into the pot. When they tasted the broth again, they rolled their eyes heavenwards and said, "Ah, tasty. If we had some vegetables, it would be perfect, absolutely perfect." One of the neighbors rushed home to get vegetables and returned with a basket full of carrots and onions. After they had been thrown in theirs too, and the stranger tasted the mixture, they said in a voice of command, "Salt and sauce." "Right here," said the housewife. Then came another command, "Bowls for everyone." People rushed to their homes in search of bowls. Some even brought back bread, some brought back fruit. And they all sat down to a delicious meal while the stranger handed out large helpings of their incredible soup. Everyone felt strangely happy as they laughed and talked and shared the very first common meal. In the middle of the merriment, the stranger quietly slipped away, leaving behind the miraculous soup stone, which they could use anytime they wanted to make the loveliest soup in the world.
Our first reading today is We Are Whole by Reverend Beth Lefevre. We are whole, even in the broken places, even where it hurts. We are whole, even in the broken places, the places where fear impedes our full engagement with life, where self-doubt corrupts our self-love, where shame makes our faces hot and our souls cold. We are whole even in those places where perfectionism blends the joy of full immersion into person, place, activity, where good enough does not reside except in our silent longings, where our gaps must be fast filled with substance, accomplishment, or frenzied activity lest they gape open in disgust. We are whole where we would doubt our own goodness, richness, fullness, and depth, where we would doubt our own significance, our own profoundness. We are whole even in our fragility, even where we feel fragmented, alone, insubstantial, insufficient. We are whole even as we are in process, even as we stumble, even as we pick ourselves up again, for we are whole, and so worthy of respect. I invite us all to sing Spirit of Life. Following the song, we'll enter into a time of silence and then prayer. As you participate at home, remember that it's not about the perfection of silence, but the intention. Join with me in singing now.
Spirit of renewal, God of many names, source of love. We turn this month in our nation's life to reflect on the stories, the heritage, and the struggles of women throughout the ages. We seek to learn from all those voices that have been left unheard. May we pause before the silences of the ages, find who have been left out, and craft new ways of inclusion for every week and every month. May this spiritual practice bring out the voices of all those struggling, all those left apart. May we let go of our assumptions and cold comforts of what is the normal to live by, unless it is a standard that is rooted in compassion, in inclusivity, and diversity. May this month of reflection teach us to search for those stories that are different from our own. Mother of possibilities, in the finding may we come to know ourselves changed, renewed where we are dry, hopeful where we are lost, and open where we are shut. We invite the gathering to lift up the names of those we wish to hold in all our hearts this hour. Tom and Thomas, Naomi, Linda, Don Schmitz, Don, Sue, Aaron, Catherine, Gary, Jackie and Wyatt, Jeff and Jessica, Diane, Helene, Katie, Virginia Walker, Vince, Ruth Ann, Elise, Eric, Everett, Erin, the Marshalls, Tom, Prue, Roz, Eileen, Diane, Mary and Eric, Miss N, Earl and Martha, Mark and Dottie, Jinx, Cindy Kellogg, Els, for all these names spoken aloud and for all those that are written silently on the tablets of our hearts, we pray. This next reflection comes from the Unitarian Universalist Association. It was written by Anthony Cruz Pantojas, entitled Reparative Imagination. Anthony is a ministerial intern, I believe serving the Community Unitarian Church in New York City. And he writes, "This past summer, I was the only out, queer, and Afro-Boricua chaplain intern at a hospital. Our frenzied daily routine included taking a wellness survey and donning face shields, like something akin to a dystopian scene. We were preparing for battle. Images of those in the throes of the virus were seared in our minds while we were waiting for temperature checks to be cleared to work. My sensibilities as a free thinker and Unitarian Universalist were heightened. My fellow chaplain interns often made references to God or a higher power. Some referred to abstract notions of salvation, feelings of being complete, or finding the truth. As a humanist, I believe we can harness the complexities of our human narrative to inspire reparative imagination in the here and now. During my chaplaincy, I found that many people could not feel, dream, or imagine being fundamentally whole. In one pastoral encounter, I visited an older patient, frail and despondent, who was experiencing isolation from their family and their community. They lamented, "God is punishing me for being an awful partner. I am alone. Where did I go wrong? Why am I broken?" I sat down next to the hospital bed. They lit up when I began to speak in Spanish. They recounted their values, fond memories with their kids, and the grounding rituals from their Roman Catholic faith. They described struggles with their partner's alcoholism, and being chided after multiple drunken stupors. They remembered his constant refrains, "You're an awful partner, you're broken." I looked intently at them and replied, "You are not broken, you are beloved." Trying to conjure something that would be impactful, I said, "I don't believe that human beings are broken. I think that things, systems, and institutions might be broken, but not people. Broken implies a fundamental flaw. It reminds me of a common saying I've heard, mi alma está rota en mil pedazos." It refers to the soul being shattered into 1,000 pieces, or a belief that our past was so bad that there could be no hope. However, to me, hope is not aspirational. It's something that we should cultivate in our actions every day, not to reach some sort of enlightened state, but to illuminate possibility. He closes us with this brief meditation. I invite you to speak to yourself compassionately and gently. Recognize that even our wounds and scars serve as reminders of how far we have come. Embody and live out this unique and whole, authentic self. You are not broken. Go and live unapologetically in freedom.
This month's split plate is H2 Empower, started by our member, Helen Boxwell, who thanks the UFH for the constant support her organization has received. H2 Empower inspires hope, humanity, and higher learning in Ethiopia and Burundi. In Ethiopia, they built a community library, computer room, and a rural school library. They brought water to 4 schools and into their community and trained 450 teachers and 190 school librarians. H2 Empower built 19 public school classrooms to cut class size from over 100 children in a class. In Burundi, H2 Empower supported a microloan and literacy project and provided scholarships for Burundi students. This year, they hope to build a water and sanitation system in a primary school for 1,500 girls. You can send a check to the office or donate through the donations and pledges navigation as seen on your screen. There you can find the form as well as other information. You can also donate through the Give Plus Church app, which can be found on the App Store and Google Play. Our second reading today is Finding Salvation by Reverend Deanna Vanderver. Throughout time, our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition has held a thread of clarity. How we relate to each other creates the conditions of hell or heaven here on earth. We may not know or agree about what lies beyond this life, but it's our conviction that our actions and our inactions have consequences for the web of all existence. While fascinating and mysterious, we do not place our hopes for salvation in what happens after death. We find our salvation here on earth, showing up for each other with mercy, respect, and compassion. How are we relating to our neighbors, friends? As a people of faith, we are called to a love that is bold, to love beyond our skill and through our fear with courage and compassion. As a faithful collective, we are called to offer sanctuary, refuge, and comfort to everyone afflicted by the systems of oppression in this world. As faithful individuals, we are called to relationships of care and accountability. It makes a difference in the quality of this world when people with access to privilege and power give voice to a vision of collective liberation and name the obstacles within and without that limit us. Can we choose to live courageously, a people of faith, a people so bold? Can we faithfully challenge evil in the world and the sins of society that have become internalized within our beings? Our faith does not require that we be unafraid, only that we do not lead with a fear or make our decisions from a place of fear. Our presence matters. How we relate to each other creates the conditions of hell or heaven here on earth. May we remember and affirm that we are all in this together, friends. We are all in this together.
Morning, everyone. A woman in a village was surprised to find a very well-dressed stranger at her door asking for something to eat. "I'm sorry," she said. "I have nothing in the house right now." What a curious story this is. All we know about the stranger with the odd soup stone is how they're dressed, just a first impression, really. But with it, a rock and some good clothes, and all the folks in the village go from not feeling like they have anything to offer to being able to cook a meal for the whole town. It's enough to make one want to carry a rock around with us all the time. I've always liked the story for the rare tale of the charlatan who uses their charisma for the good, the sacred trickster who generates wealth and compassion rather than the type to siphon it away for their own ends. It reminds me of stories friends have shared who have benefited from the random driver ahead of them who chose to pay their toll at a collection site only to generate a string of folks paying for the next person behind them and making everyone's day feel better. Maybe nothing has actually changed if each successive driver still pays the same amount, but it makes a world of difference in how we see the drive. Then there's my aggressive guerrilla tactics I've mentioned from time to time regarding smiling, long lines, and CVS. Sometimes they make me feel like the kind-hearted, well-dressed stranger in the story, and other times like the villager who feels like they have nothing left to give. The story we heard today is a sad one in a way as well. It relays truthfully the world we live in, and it reminds us how much clout and status we give to strangers around us. There's a message here that we all have something to give. But so often we give away that power to others with rocks in their hands and a smart set of clothes. It's the internal voice that convinces us that everyone around us is smarter or more skilled, more talented, or better looking. It's the same one that loudly lies to us that others are more self-assured and confident. In case no one's mentioned it to you today regarding self-assurance, and it's a message I need to hear just about every day to remember, the other person is probably thinking the same thing about you. Most of us think we're more of a mess than those around us, even then, especially those who outwardly act like all the world is more a mess than they. Of course, we're all going to go through times where we are particularly down from loss or illness, drawn out from work, or innovated from family, and the world we're swimming in right now is full of so much more. They are all realities in life that will forever be things we will struggle with. But even in those moments, worth comes from within. Even if it might take a stranger or a community to help bring that sense of self-worth back to the surface. The Soupstone's resolution involves a secreted exit for this trickster of the story, who leaves that very precious rock behind. The village, the people of the village, have been gifted with the magic they need to realize their capacity for giving. They're better able to see what they're able to offer to the world. I see them as better recognizing their own value too. What they can only achieve from within, they're only able to do so by being a community. The little good-hearted kick from the story's roving trickster. So why do we do it? Why do we give rocks magical powers and think we have none of our own? Why do we so clearly see the value in others and so often have a terrible time seeing the value in ourselves? Why do we all do it and easily forget that that means the person next to us is also struggling? How do we lift up the mantle of trickster in the story and live that generosity for ourselves? That's the religious question or questions of the day. Our first principle that states that we covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Often, when I hear that first principle spoken, it's clear folks are very conscious of two of three aspects of the principle that I find important, most important. One of those aspects crucially recognizes that we must stand on the side of love in our human relations. Every person is deserving of love and compassion just because we live. Each of us are deserving of being treated with respect, regardless of race, class, gender, sexuality, or gender expression. Even though we don't always succeed in this, this principle reminds us of our struggle toward that lofty and healing goal. The second way I often hear the principle applied is that call that just like those we strive to support, we too are deserving of respect from others. We fight for others' rights and we struggle for our own. In this principle reminds us that when folks are treating us poorly for our differences, we do not deserve it. It's not our fault. The third aspect I hear rarely mentioned is the opposite of the second way. If all the rough treatments we may be subjected to by others is wrong, what of those we inflict upon ourselves? Who do we go to when our harshest critic and the most unjust just judge is no one other than ourselves? It's the villager that believes they have nothing to give, when in fact they have so very much to give. We often hear that first principle as a justice issue. That's often how we preach about it mostly. And it's definitely that as well, but it can be a pastoral issue too. How do we convince ourselves that we deserve to treat ourselves as well as we expect ourselves to treat others? How do we teach ourselves to see the value we find in others within us as well? I've been wrestling with these questions in relation to our 7 principles. As Unitarian Universalists, we are a covenantal faith. Rather than coming together based on a shared creed, we are a faith whose identity is based on shared commitments. As a tradition, we first stand in relation to one another, rather than how much we agree with one another. Despite all this, we have structured our 7 principles as beliefs in many ways. The wording for all of them begins with us agreeing to covenant, to affirm, or promote, and yet we essentially structure them as affirmations of belief and how we talk about it every day. So how does this little aside, this sort of mini UU primer, relate to the questions of how we teach ourselves to see the value we find in others within us? That question of the flip side of the first principle and how we internalize it. Simply put, how can the principles be more than affirmations of static belief while offering a theological solution to the many intersecting questions of spirit and heart? I should say that if we're reading this sermon in a book, there would be an asterisk next to the word theological. I say this from time to time. Theological is how we find meaning in the world, how we find and make meaning in the world. So how do we orient ourselves in response to the religiously structured principles we covenant to affirm and promote? I often wonder how different we would engage with our principles if we saw them as religious promises or religious challenges, rather than simply religious beliefs. As a covenantal faith, we focus first on our relations, so our core principles ought to similarly be defined. A promise is a sort of belief that we extend out into the world between ourselves and someone else. And a challenge is the same with what we set forth for ourselves. Although sometimes it's a belief that we commit to just within ourselves. And I'm talking here about the bigger ones, like the promise a parent makes to their child, verbalized or implicit, in that they will raise and care for them with all their heart. It's a belief that the parent typically holds to, and that one that children usually believe, at least till our teenage years. The promise is lived between the parent and the child. It has as much power and substance as the maker invests in it. It's deeply relational and intrinsically predicated on belief. So what changes? Our principles are written as somewhat action-oriented. Covenanting to affirm and promote is language of action, yet when we speak about them to most UUs, we internalize them as beliefs, as I said. Folks typically truncate the statement and say, I believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Well, that's a pretty good belief. One I happen to agree with. We may think of them as things we ought to also follow since we believe in them, but they tend to be expressed as beliefs first and actions second. So in some ways, visualizing the principles as promises or challenges could just be a re-clarification of what's already written. To some extent, that could also be enough in itself. I find that many of us struggle with explaining our faith tradition as non-creedal while conveying our core principles. When we forget their action statements, the line between creed and non-creed kind of blurs. And if we're trying to explain our religion to someone who's not familiar with it, we might get a little tongue-tied here. But I feel there's more to hearing our principles as promises or challenges than simply that. Promises and challenges bring us back to the theological question. In the case of the first principle, our faith makes the bold statement that everyone has worth and dignity, including yourself, including myself. I promise you that you're inherently worthy. You may not be feeling that to be the case at this moment because of something you're carrying with you from work or school, or how you acted on your way from the living room to your office this morning. But it's a promise Unitarian Universalists make. We're not saying we're forgiven, although we all need to be forgiven from time to time. We're not saying we're justified or sinners or lost or found. We're saying we have worth and we deserve to be treated with dignity, even by ourselves. So in light of that question I posed before, how do we teach ourselves to see the value we find in others within ourselves as well? Now we have a theological basis for a religious discipline. Do we choose to assent to the promise of our faith, the challenge of our faith that it puts forth? Or do we choose to turn away from that? Those three aspects of the first principle also stand in relation to one another, recognizing the worth in others, others recognizing the worth in us, and we recognizing the worth in ourselves. If the first two ways come more naturally to you, and I know they do for me, remind yourself of them when you can't find anything about yourself to value. That's the beauty of a promise made. They may be difficult to keep, but they're made with integrity. They plot a very honest course. In this regard, the promise of our faith encourages us to live knowing that we believe in the people around us, that we're all deserving of a place at the table. Our story this morning ended with the exclamation, "Bowls for everyone." Then they all sat down to a delicious meal with the stranger, while the stranger handed out large helpings of their incredible soup. Everyone felt strangely happy as they laughed and talked and shared their very first common meal. We too often give up our self-worth to the judgment of others, and sooner place credence in magic rocks than believe unfettered we have something to contribute. The promise of our faith is the balm of this malady. Blessed be and amen. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the fire of commitment, or the warmth of community. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again. For those who say God, may God be with us. For those who embrace life, may life return our affections. For those who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step. For this is the day we are given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen.
Remember, don't sign off. You can stay on and join us for some informal gathering at our fellowship hour right here on the same link. We'll be here in a couple of minutes. Hope to see you there.